Let's now talk about my number 2 pickup, another running back. Should you miss on these Titan fill-ins, I think Boston Scott, especially over these next 2 to 3 weeks, as long as we've got Mr. Miles Sanders over there on the IR, I do think Boston Scott's going to be highly usable. He was the main back to begin the game. He's only 20% rostered. I think he deserves 20% or more of your fab in this new backfield. Now, granted, his 12 carries weren't even the team high. We saw 13 go to Gainwell and 12 also go to Jordan Howard. But Scott was by far the most productive. 60 yards, 2 scores on the ground compared to just 21 yards for Gainwell. We did see 57 yards and 2 scores for Howard, who looked better than he's looked in a few years now. Even still, though, this is what I kind of attach myself to when I say Boston Scott's by far the priority. First 15 plays were all Boston Scott in the Eagles' backfield without Miles Sanders. The next 14, 5 went to Scott, 4 went to Jordan Howard. The next 17 plays, 11 Howard, 6 Scott. They had a big lead at this point. They were kind of churning. And then they closed the game out. Final 14 plays all went to Gainwell. All garbage time. They were up by like 40 at that point. So when it was early, Boston Scott was the one getting that early war. He also has 5 touches inside the 10-yard line across the 2 games. He's got 3 touchdowns in that span. He's converted 3 of those 5 into TDs right there. And he could get some receiving work done, Boston Scott can. A mini little Darren Sproles type, playing 45% of the snaps, leading the way, 29 for him, 20 for Gainwell, 16 for Howard. But again, the most meaningful ones, the first team, like games on the line early on in the action, it was Boston Scott show. That's the guy I would be banging my chips onto. Jordan Howard, yeah, sure. In really, really deep leagues, you might take a stab at. But I think Boston Scott has far more value than Kenneth Gainwell, who looks like he might be the fantasy fool's gold of last week. Okay, guys, continue that thumbs up, share us out. Let's get this crowd going. Let's get more people in here. Would mean the world if you can try to help us gain that pack. I see 11 questions so far. Let's get that up to 40. Let's get a ton of questions in here tonight. I'd love it. DeVante Parker, my number 1 receiver of the week and 3rd overall, my top 15 waiver wire rankings. He set season highs this last week. First game back of the shoulder injury. Season high in targets, 11, catches, 8, and receiving yards, 85. And he just looked great doing it. Tua showed more trust than he showed all last year, letting this guy go do his thing in contested situations. That's when he's at his best, DeVante Parker. But even the routes, he was gaining some separation. And when he wasn't, Tua was giving some trust throws there. He's now attempted 126 passes in their last 3 games, Tua has. This offense is very air-centric, so averaging well over 40 attempts per game. They now have Houston coming up this next week. In the fantasy playoffs, they get the Jets, New Orleans, and Tennessee. 2 of those 3 are top 10 matchups for wide receivers there. New Orleans has potential to be a shootout if Tua can hold up his end of the bargains. Either way, we've got DeVante Parker. This wasn't just like a 1-week fluke. He's back to trying to get him going. He's averaged 8.6 targets and a 24% target share across his full 5 games this season, 65.4 receiving yards, and at least 7 targets in all 5 games. I mean, this guy has been getting it done quite solidly. I think he is a immediate plug-and-play wide receiver 3 where there's not a ton of those guys out there at this point. So it dropped in tons of leagues, 36% rostered. I think he's well worth 15 to 20% of your fab if you're wide receiver needy or you need a bye-week plug-in coming up here. Potentially a better long-term option. I really like this guy, Rashod Bateman. We've talked about him multiple times on this show. A lot of people dropped him, though, because it was the bye week and they had a crunch, whatever it might be. He's only 31% roster. I think he's definitely worth 15% or more of your fab here. He stepped right in. He's seen 6 targets in back-to-back games, so averaging right around a 17% target share, 18% rather. He's averaged 17.1 routes per game. And out of the slot. So you have to move it all over the place. That's just out of the slot. So this guy is dynamite in terms of that. He's got 7 receptions on his 12 targets. He's racked up 109 yards in those 2 games. And this is pretty damn impressive considering he was on the IR for the entire season. He has been kind of working on the fly to get that chemistry done. He had 25, and 30-yard catches in week 7. So big play threat here, getting deep down the field. Don't forget about this guy. I think he could truly emerge as one of those set and forget wide receiver 3s. We know Parker's going to be that. So if it's one or the other, I'd probably prioritize Parker. We know what he is at this point. He's getting it done with Tua at levels we didn't see last year. I'd prioritize Parker, but right behind him, especially if you have a little bit of leash to let this guy develop on your bench, I love Rashod Bateman and what he could be for this Ravens offense. Let's just see what Sammy Watkins, his pending return, is that going to force Bateman out of 2 wide sets? I imagine they're going to go with the rook. He's looked better than Watkins ever has. Maybe they kick Watkins in more inside. We'll find out. We will see. But I love this kid moving forward. Mark Ingram at the backfield, my third running back of this week, 37% rostered. I think he's also worth 15% fab. These top 5, all guys I would spend pretty decent on, really solid options. And I don't know that we'll see options this great. And it starts to really thin out as the season goes on. I think Mark Ingram's a guy we're going to all wish we had rostered if he was out there in our leagues. Coming back to New Orleans, he gets 6 carries and 2 catches. Solid usage there, turns it into 52 yards against a pretty tough Tampa Bay run defense. So solid. He looked like he had more juice than we saw the entire time he was with the Texans, probably because he's getting more space in this offense. And it was just solid overall to see that. We saw 51 snaps go to Kamara, 22 went to Ingram, so a decent role. It wasn't like the olden days where it was a near 50-50 split between these guys. But again, 6 carries, 2 targets. He hauls them both in. 8 touches in this offense is no joke. Then you got the handcuff with benefits style upside if something happens to Kamara. Now, this isn't like the Drew Brees offense where Latavius Murray was averaging 30 points per game when Kamara missed time. But I think he could get 20 plus from Ingram. He'd have like low-end RB1 upside within this scheme. Remember last year, Murray had some of his best games when Taysom Hill was at QB. They got a lot more run heavy. Now that Jameis has torn his ACL, it could be more run centric of an attack. And this was his first game back in a while. This might be his lightest workload we see at only 8 touches. I think Ingram has returned home. It looked like he was pumped to be there playing with a newfound zip. I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the year there in New Orleans. Definitely should be rostered in far more leagues. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.